The crimson sunset painted the vast Wyoming sky as Eleanor Lockhart stepped off the train, clutching nothing but a weathered carpetbag and the wilting remnants of her dignity. Cheyenne, 1882, a place where she hoped to bury her past and perhaps, if fortune finally smiled upon her, build a future worth living. "Miss, you sure this is your stop?" the conductor asked, skepticism etched in the deep lines of his face. Cheyenne ain't exactly welcoming to ladies traveling alone. Eleanor straightened her spine, refusing to let her fatigue show. "I'm quite certain, thank you, I have arrangements." This was a lie, of course. She had nothing, no job, no home, no family waiting. Just $23 sewn into the hem of her dress, and a letter of recommendation from her previous employer that was vague enough to be useless. But anything was better than staying in Boston, where whispers followed her like shadows, and her family name had become synonymous with scandal. The train whistled its departure as Eleanor stood alone on the platform, the dust from the departing carriages settling on the faded blue of her traveling dress. Cheyenne sprawled before her, a chaotic blend of hastily erected wooden structures and ambitious brick buildings, all humming with the promise of opportunity and the threat of failure. "You look lost," came a voice, firm but not unkind. Eleanor turned to face a woman in her 40s, her practical dress and stern expression suggesting someone who tolerated no foolishness. "Mrs. Margaret Sullivan," the woman said, extending no hand but offering a nod. "I run the boarding house for respectable women. If you're looking for accommodations, I have one room available. $5 a week, includes breakfast and dinner." Eleanor quickly calculated how far her meager savings would stretch. "I'm looking for employment as well, Mrs." Sullivan's eyes narrowed as she assessed Eleanor from bonnet to boots. "What skills do you have, miss?" "Lockhart, Eleanor Lockhart. I was a governess in Boston. I can teach, so keep accounts, and I'm a quick learner." Mrs. Sullivan didn't sound impressed. "Teaching positions are filled for the season. There might be work at Madigan's Mercantile or perhaps the new hotel, but I'll warn you now, this town doesn't take kindly to secrets, and everyone who comes here has them." Eleanor clutched her bag tighter. "I simply seek honest work, Mrs. Sullivan." "Don't they all?" the woman replied cryptically. "Well, come along then if you're coming. Night falls fast in Wyoming, and the streets aren't safe for a woman alone." The boarding house was austere but clean, with rules posted prominently in the narrow entryway. No men above the first floor, no alcohol, no returning after 9 o'clock, no exceptions. Eleanor's room was small, a narrow bed, a washstand, a battered dresser, and a window overlooking a dusty side street. It was humbling for a woman who had once had her own suite in one of Boston's finest homes. "Dinner's at 6 sharp," Mrs. Sullivan informed her. "Tomorrow I suggest you start looking for employment immediately. Idle hands find trouble in Cheyenne faster than most places." Left alone, Eleanor sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself a moment of doubt. Her father's final words echoed in her mind, "You'll never be enough, Eleanor." Not for Boston society, not for any decent man, not even for this family. He had disowned her after the scandal, a scandal that wasn't even of her making, but one she'd shouldered the blame for to protect her younger sister. She unpacked her few possessions, arranging them with care. A photograph of her mother, 2 books of poetry, a small silver hairbrush, and 3 dresses besides the one she wore. It wasn't much to show for 22 years of life. Morning came too quickly, the Wyoming sun harsh and unforgiving. Eleanor dressed in her best, a navy blue skirt and white shirtwaist with only minimal mending visible at the cuff, and set out to find work. The Mercantile turned her away immediately. "No experience," the owner said dismissively, hardly looking at her letter of recommendation. The hotel was more polite but equally unhelpful. "We need chambermaids who can handle the rough clientele," the manager explained. "You're too refined." By midday, Eleanor had been rejected from 7 establishments. She stood on the boardwalk, trying to maintain her composure as hunger and desperation began to gnaw at her. That's when she noticed the sign in the window of the Territorial Enterprise newspaper office. "Assistant needed, inquire within." The newspaper office was cramped and chaotic, smelling of ink and tobacco. A harried-looking man with spectacles balanced precariously on his nose looked up as she entered. "Help you, miss." "I've come about the assistant position," Eleanor said, summoning her most confident voice. The man laughed. No offense, but newspaper work isn't suitable for ladies of your appearance. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. I can read and write with perfect grammar. I'm organized, punctual, and not afraid of hard work. What exactly about my appearance suggests I can't handle your correspondence and filing? The man, Horace Jenkins, as he finally introduced himself, seemed taken aback by her forthrightness. It's not proper work for a lady. With all due respect, Mr. Jenkins, propriety doesn't fill an empty stomach. I need employment and you need assistance. Why not give me a trial period? Perhaps it was desperation on his part or something in her determined gaze, but Jenkins agreed to a 1-week trial at half wages. It wasn't ideal, but it was a start. As Eleanor left the newspaper office with instructions to return the following morning, she nearly collided with a man on the boardwalk. Her apology died on her lips as she looked way up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. "Careful there, madam," he said, steadying her with a hand that could have easily spanned her entire waist. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His clothes were those of a working man, worn denim, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up revealing muscular forearms, scuffed boots, and a gun belt that looked like it had seen use. "I apologize," Eleanor managed, stepping back from his touch. "I wasn't watching where I was going." "No harm done." His voice had a pleasant drawl that marked him as not being from Wyoming originally. "You must be new to town. I'm Wyatt O'Brien." "Eleanor Lockhart," she replied, then wondered if she should have used a false name. Too late now. "Well, Miss Lockhart, welcome to Cheyenne." His smile transformed his rugged face, softening it in a way that made her heart perform an unexpected little skip. "If you need anything, folks around here can point you to my ranch outside of town, the Triple Creek." Before she could respond, someone called his name from across the street. "Duty calls," he said with a tip of his hat. "Good day, Miss Lockhart." Eleanor watched him stride away, noticing how the crowd seemed to part for him naturally, how men nodded respectfully and women's gazes lingered. Clearly, Wyatt O'Brien was someone of consequence in Cheyenne. Her first day at the newspaper was a trial by fire. Horace Jenkins ran the operation with more enthusiasm than organization, and Eleanor spent most of her time sorting through months of neglected correspondence and haphazard filing. But she was determined to prove herself indispensable, staying well past the agreed-upon hours to create a functional system. "You're still here?" Jenkins asked when he returned from covering a town council meeting. "It's nearly 8 o'clock. "I wanted to finish organizing the subscription records," Eleanor explained, showing him the ledger she'd created. "You've been charging some people twice and missing payments from others entirely." Jenkins stared at her work in astonishment. "How did you make sense of all this?" "Systems and patterns, Mr. Jenkins. Everything has an order if you look closely enough." He studied her with new respect. "Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment, Miss Lockhart. Can you return tomorrow?" By the end of her trial week, Eleanor had transformed the chaotic office into a model of efficiency. Jenkins offered her a permanent position at full wages, still modest, but enough to cover her room and board with a small amount left over for savings. Word of the efficient new assistant at the newspaper spread quickly in the small town. Eleanor found herself greeted by name as she walked to and from work, and Mrs. Sullivan's initial frostiness thawed slightly. "You've surprised me," the boarding house matron admitted over dinner one evening. "Most Eastern women who come here either leave within a month or—" She trailed off meaningfully. "Or," Eleanor prompted, "or they find themselves a husband or protector," another boarder, a school teacher named Miss Perkins, supplied. "Wyoming territory is still 3 men to every woman after all," Eleanor focused on her stew. "I'm not looking for either." "Every woman needs protection in the West," Mrs. Sullivan stated flatly. "Sooner or later you'll find that out." Eleanor might have dismissed this as dramatics had she not experienced it firsthand the following evening. She had stayed late again at the newspaper office, working on a special edition covering the railroad expansion. Darkness had fallen by the time she started back to the boarding house, but the streets were still busy with saloon patrons and evening shoppers. She was passing the Silver Dollar Saloon when a man staggered out, clearly intoxicated, and blocked her path. "Well, ain't you a pretty one?" he slurred, reaching for her arm. "Come have a drink with me, darlin'." "No, thank you," Eleanor said firmly, trying to step around him. "Please excuse me." But the man wasn't easily deterred. "Don't be unfriendly now, just one drink." The lady said no. The voice came from behind her, and Eleanor knew without turning that it belonged to Wyatt O'Brien. She hadn't seen him since their brief encounter her first day in town, but she'd heard his name mentioned frequently, usually with respect, occasionally with fear. "Mind your business, O'Brien," the drunk growled, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Miss Lockhart is a friend of mine," Wyatt said, stepping beside Eleanor, "and I make it my business when friends are bothered." The drunk measured Wyatt's imposing height and the confident way he rested his hand near his holster. "Didn't know she was spoken for," he muttered, backing away. "I'm not," Eleanor began, but Wyatt placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Let me see you home," he said once the man had disappeared back into the saloon. "It's not safe for you to be out alone after dark." "So I've been told," Eleanor replied, annoyed at the implication that she couldn't handle herself but grateful for his timely intervention. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. O'Brien, but I'm perfectly capable of walking 3 blocks. His lips twitched with amusement. "I don't doubt your capabilities, Miss Lockhart, but I'd sleep better knowing you got home safely." There was something in his earnest expression that made it difficult to maintain her indignation. "Very well." They walked in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I hear you've been making quite an impression at the newspaper. Jenkins told me his subscription rate is up 15% since you organized his records." "You know Mr. Jenkins?" "Everyone knows everyone in Cheyenne," Wyatt said with a shrug, "and everyone's been talking about the Eastern lady who's revolutionizing the newspaper office." Eleanor felt a flush of pride mixed with wariness. "I hope they're not saying too much else. People will always talk," he said. "The question is whether you give them something worth talking about." They reached the boarding house too quickly. Eleanor found herself reluctant to end their conversation. "Thank you for your escort, Mr. O'Brien." "Wyatt," he corrected. "And it was my pleasure, Miss Lockhart." "Eleanor," she offered in return, surprising herself. His smile was warm in the lamplight. "Eleanor," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt on his tongue. "I hope our paths cross again soon." She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the glow of the town. There was something about Wyatt O'Brien that unsettled her in ways both alarming and exhilarating. The next morning, a package waited for Eleanor at the boarding house, a small pistol with a pearl handle, accompanied by a note in bold handwriting. "For your protection until I can provide it personally. W.O." Mrs. Sullivan raised an eyebrow at the gift. "Wyatt O'Brien. You've caught the attention of the most eligible bachelor in the territory." "He was merely being kind," Eleanor insisted, though the note suggested otherwise. "Kind isn't what built the Triple Creek Ranch from nothing," Mrs. Sullivan said. "Wyatt O'Brien doesn't do anything without purpose." Eleanor tucked the pistol into her reticule, uncertain whether to be flattered or concerned by his presumption. She had no intention of becoming dependent on any man, no matter how compelling his blue eyes or confident his smile. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor settled into a routine. Her days at the newspaper expanded to include not just organizing but occasionally writing small pieces, announcements, social notes, even a regular column on Eastern fashions and customs that proved unexpectedly popular with the local women. She saw Wyatt intermittently, sometimes at community events, once at the Mercantile where he insisted on carrying her parcels, and twice when he specifically came to the newspaper office with information for an article that seemed flimsy justification for his visit. Each encounter left her increasingly aware of him, the way his voice deepened when he spoke directly to her, the respectful distance he maintained despite the clear interest in his eyes, the subtle ways he sought to protect her without diminishing her independence. Summer turned to autumn, bringing crisp wines down from the mountains and the annual harvest festival. The entire town transformed with decorations, and excitement filled the air. "You'll come, of course," Jenkins told Eleanor as they closed the office one evening. "Everyone attends the festival." "I hadn't planned on it," she admitted. Her savings were growing, but she was still careful with every penny. Jenkins waved away her hesitation. "It's included in being a citizen of Cheyenne. Besides, I need someone to report on it for the paper." The festival was held in the town square, with lanterns strung between buildings, tables laden with food contributed by local families, and a band playing lively tunes. Eleanor wore her best dress, a deep green that she'd carefully altered to follow the latest fashion she'd seen in Harper's Bazaar. She was taking notes on the festivities when Wyatt appeared beside her, looking uncommonly formal in a crisp white shirt and black vest. "You look beautiful," he said without preamble. "That color suits you." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, you look very handsome yourself." "May I have this dance?" he asked as the band struck up a waltz. She hesitated. "I'm supposed to be observing for the newspaper." "You can observe perfectly well from the dance floor," he countered, his smile teasing. "Besides, how can you report on the dancing if you don't participate?" His logic was dubious, but Eleanor found herself placing her hand in his outstretched palm. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused. Wyatt was a surprisingly graceful dancer for such a large man. He guided her through the steps with confidence, maintaining a proper distance while still making her acutely aware of his physical presence. "You don't talk much about your life before Cheyenne," he remarked as they circled the dance floor. Eleanor tensed slightly. "There's not much to tell." "I doubt that very much," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Everyone has a story. Some stories are better left untold." His expression grew serious. "Whatever you're running from, Eleanor, it doesn't matter here. Cheyenne has a way of letting people reinvent themselves." "Is that what you did?" she asked, deflecting attention from herself. A shadow crossed his face. "In a way. I came here with nothing but determination 10 years ago, built my ranch from the ground up. The Triple Creek is quite impressive from what I hear." "You should see it for yourself sometime," he said, his tone carefully casual. "The aspens on the North Ridge are turning gold this time of year. It's quite a sight." The invitation hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. "Perhaps someday," she replied non-committally. The music ended, and Wyatt reluctantly released her. "I should warn you," he said, nodding toward a group of older women watching them with undisguised interest. "Dancing with me will start rumors." Eleanor followed his gaze and recognized several of the town's most prominent matrons. "Let them talk," she said with more bravado than she felt. "I've weathered worse gossip than being seen dancing with a respected rancher." Something flickered in his eyes, admiration, perhaps, or curiosity. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said suddenly. "Not here, not with the whole town watching. Just us." The invitation was improper by Boston standards. A single woman dining alone with a man would cause a scandal, but this wasn't Boston, and Eleanor was tired of living by rules that had only brought her pain. "Yes," she said before she could reconsider. "I would like that." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains. "I'll collect you at 6. The next day passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Eleanor found herself unable to focus on her work, reading the same paragraph 3 times without comprehension. "You've got it bad," Jenkins commented, startling her from her distraction. "I don't know what you mean," she replied primly. "O'Brien's a good man," Jenkins continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Hard when he needs to be, but fair. Built that ranch with his own 2 hands after coming here with nothing. Folks respect him." Eleanor busied herself with straightening papers. "I'm having dinner with him, Mr. Jenkins, not marrying him. In Cheyenne, one often leads to the other," he replied with a knowing look. "Just be careful. O'Brien has enemies as well as friends." This was news to Eleanor. "Enemies? Why?" Jenkins shrugged. "Success breeds resentment, and O'Brien doesn't back down when he believes he's right, a quality that hasn't endeared him to everyone." This information added another layer to Eleanor's already complicated feelings about the evening ahead. Wyatt arrived precisely at 6, driving a polished buggy pulled by 2 matching bay horses. "You look lovely," he said, helping her into the seat. "Where are we going?" she asked, noticing they were heading out of town. "I thought we'd have dinner at my ranch," he explained. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, is an excellent cook, and we'll have more privacy than at the hotel restaurant." Eleanor knew she should object to the impropriety, but found herself nodding. "That sounds nice." The Triple Creek Ranch was even more impressive than rumors suggested. A large main house built of solid timber stood proudly on a gentle rise, surrounded by barns, bunkhouses, and corrals. In the distance, cattle grazed on golden grassland that stretched to the foot of purple mountains. "It's beautiful," Eleanor breathed as Wyatt helped her down from the buggy. "It's home," he said simply, but she could hear the pride in his voice. The interior of the house was a surprise spacious and well-appointed, with comfortable furniture, colorful rugs, and bookshelves filled with volumes. It wasn't the rough bachelor quarters she had expected. "You have a lovely home," she said, running her fingers along the spines of books that included history, philosophy, and classical literature. "Thank you. My mother believed education was important even for a ranch boy from Texas. She'd be pleased to see you appreciating her books." "Is your mother?" Eleanor let the question hang. "She passed 6 years ago," Wyatt said. "Influenza. My father died when I was 14. It's just me now." "I'm sorry for your loss," Eleanor said quietly. "My mother died when I was 16. My father—" She hesitated. "My father is still living, but we're estranged." Wyatt studied her face but didn't press for details. "Family can be complicated," he said simply. Dinner was served by a small Chinese woman with a severe expression that softened when she looked at Wyatt. The food was a delicious blend of Western and Chinese flavors that Eleanor had never experienced. "Mrs. Chen came to work for me 5 years ago," Wyatt explained. "Her husband helped build the railroad until an accident took his life. She's the best cook in the territory and has taught me a great deal about her culture." "The food is wonderful," Eleanor told Mrs. Chen, who acknowledged the compliment with a slight bow before disappearing back to the kitchen. As they ate, their conversation flowed easily from books to current events to childhood memories. Wyatt spoke openly about his struggles to establish the ranch against drought, harsh winters, and hostile neighbors. Eleanor found herself sharing more than she had intended about her love of learning, her brief career as a governess, and her passion for writing. "Why did you leave Boston?" he asked finally, his eyes intent on her face. Eleanor set down her fork. "It's not a pleasant story." "Few true stories are entirely pleasant," he replied. "But I'd like to know if you're willing to tell me." Perhaps it was the wine or the comfortable intimacy of the moment, but Eleanor found herself wanting to unburden herself of the secret she'd carried for nearly a year. "I was governess to the Blackwood family, one of Boston's oldest and wealthiest. They had 2 daughters, 15 and 12. She took a deep breath. "The elder daughter, Charlotte, became involved with her father's business partner, a married man of 35. When her mother discovered them in a compromising position, Charlotte claimed I had encouraged the relationship." Wyatt's expression darkened. "And they believed her." "It was easier to blame the governess than acknowledge their daughter's indiscretion," Eleanor said bitterly. "I was dismissed without reference. The story spread through Boston society. My father, who values reputation above all else, disowned me publicly to salvage our family name." "That's why you came west," Wyatt said, understanding dawning, "to escape the scandal." "To start again," Eleanor corrected. "Somewhere my name wasn't tainted, where I could be judged on my own merits." Wyatt reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm against her skin. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. Does it change your opinion of me?" she asked, unable to hide her vulnerability. "Only to confirm what I already suspected," he replied, his voice gentle. "That you are stronger and more honorable than most people I know." Something unfurled in Eleanor's chest, a tight knot of shame she had carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. In Wyatt's clear gaze, she found no judgment, only admiration. The ride back to town was quiet, a comfortable silence settling between them. When they reached the boarding house, Wyatt helped her down, retaining her hand a moment longer than necessary. "May I call on you properly?" he asked. "Sunday afternoon, perhaps," Eleanor smiled. "I would like that very much." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture both old-fashioned and thrilling. "Good night, Eleanor Lockhart." "Good night, Wyatt O'Brien." She watched him drive away, her hand still tingling from his kiss, her heart lighter than it had been in longer than she could remember. Sunday couldn't come quickly enough. Eleanor found herself counting the hours, alternating between anticipation and anxiety. When Wyatt arrived, dressed in his Sunday best with a bouquet of late wildflowers, Mrs. Sullivan gave them a knowing look before pointedly mentioning they should remain in the parlor with the door open. "She thinks your intentions are dishonorable," Eleanor teased once they were seated on the stiff parlor sofa, a careful foot of space between them. "On the contrary," Wyatt replied seriously. My intentions are entirely honorable, which is probably what worries her. His frankness took Eleanor's breath away. Wyatt, too soon, he asked, watching her carefully. I don't mean to rush you, Eleanor. I just want to be clear that I'm not trifling with your affections. We hardly know each other, she protested weakly. I know enough, he said. I know you're intelligent, principled, and braver than anyone gives you credit for. I know talking with you makes me feel more alive than I've felt in years. And I know that when I'm not with you, I'm thinking about when I'll see you again. His honesty was disarming. In Boston, courtship was a careful dance of subtle hints and social maneuvering. Wyatt's straightforward approach left her without her usual defenses. I feel the same, she admitted, but I've made mistakes in trusting too quickly before. Then we'll take our time, he said, reaching for her hand. I'm not going anywhere, Eleanor. Over the following weeks, their courtship became the talk of Cheyenne. Wyatt called on Eleanor regularly, escorted her to church and community events, and often appeared at the newspaper office to walk her home. For Christmas, he gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials embossed in gold. For your writing, he explained. Jenkins told me you've been working on stories beyond your newspaper pieces. Eleanor was touched by his thoughtfulness. How did you know? I pay attention to what matters to you, he said simply. Winter settled over Wyoming with brutal force. Blizzards howled down from the mountains, and temperatures plummeted. Eleanor learned the harsh realities of Western winter's frozen water pipes, the constant battle to stay warm, the isolation when snowdrifts made travel impossible. During one particularly vicious storm, Wyatt appeared at the boarding house with a sleigh full of firewood and provisions. The passes are closed, he told Mrs. Sullivan. Might be a week before supplies can get through from Laramie. Thought you ladies could use extra wood in some of Mrs. Chen's preserves. His thoughtfulness extended beyond Eleanor to the entire boarding house, earning him the approval of even the most skeptical residents. Later, as he prepared to brave the storm to return to his ranch, Eleanor pulled him aside. Be careful, she said, straightening his scarf. The ranch is too far in this weather. I'll stay in town tonight, he promised. Josh Miller has rooms above his livery stable. Eleanor hesitated, then rose on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek. Thank you for taking care of everyone. His eyes darkened at her touch. Eleanor, he said, his voice rough, if I don't leave now, Mrs. Sullivan is going to come at me with her broom. She laughed softly. Go, I'll see you when the storm clears. The blizzard lasted 3 days, paralyzing the town. When it finally abated, the community came together to dig out. Eleanor joined the women preparing food for the men clearing snow and was carrying a pot of stew to the workers when she overheard a conversation that stopped her cold. O'Brien's gone soft, a man was saying, running supplies to the boarding house like some errand boy. All because of that Eastern woman. She's got him wrapped around her finger, another agreed, but it won't last. Women like that aren't built for ranch life. First hardship, she'll run back east. If her kind could hack it out here, they wouldn't need men like us, a third voice added. She'll never be enough for a man like O'Brien. Too delicate, too refined. He needs a frontier woman who can handle the realities of ranch life. Eleanor retreated before they could see her, their words echoing painfully in her mind. They mirrored her own deepest fears that she wasn't strong enough, resilient enough, or capable enough for the life Wyatt lived. That eventually he would realize it too. When Wyatt found her later, her smile felt forced. He noticed immediately. What's wrong? He asked, brushing snow from his coat. Nothing, she said, just tired from all the storm preparations. He studied her face, clearly not believing her. Eleanor, talk to me. Do you think I'm too delicate for Wyoming? She asked abruptly, surprise crossed his features. Where is this coming from? I overheard some men talking, she admitted. They said I'd never be enough for you, that I'm too refined for ranch life, that I'd run back east at the first hardship. Anger flashed in Wyatt's eyes. Who said this? It doesn't matter, Eleanor said. What matters is whether you think it's true. Wyatt took her hands in his. Eleanor Lockhart, you are the strongest person I know. You left everything familiar to start over in a harsh, unfamiliar place. You faced gossip, prejudice, and hardship without flinching. Delicate, no, refined. Yes, and that's not a liability, it's an asset. But ranch life is so different from anything I've known. Life is learned, he said firmly. Skills can be taught, character is what matters, and yours is remarkable. His faith in her was humbling. "The winter has barely begun," she said. "There will be harder days ahead. And we'll face them together," he promised. "If that's what you want." The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. "I want to be with you," Eleanor said softly. "I just don't want to disappoint you." Wyatt's expression softened. "The only way you could disappoint me is by letting other people's doubts come between us." With spring came new beginnings. The newspaper expanded, with Eleanor promoted to assistant editor. Her social column had become so popular that women from as far as Laramie wrote to her for advice and commentary. Wyatt's business thrived as well. The Triple Creek Ranch secured a contract supplying beef to the cavalry at Fort Russell, increasing his already substantial standing in the community. Their courtship deepened. Eleanor visited the ranch regularly, learning about the operation and spending time with Mrs. Chen, who gradually warmed to her and began teaching her Chinese cooking techniques. Wyatt encouraged Eleanor's writing beyond the newspaper, reading her stories and offering thoughtful feedback. By late spring, their intentions were clear to everyone in Cheyenne. The only question was when, not if, they would marry. The proposal came on a perfect June evening. Wyatt had taken Eleanor riding to his favorite spot on the ranch, a high meadow overlooking the creek that gave the property its name. Wildflowers carpeted the ground in a riot of color, and the setting sun turned the distant mountains to gold. "This is where I decided to build the ranch," Wyatt told her as they sat on a blanket, sharing a picnic. "I camped here my first night in Wyoming territory. The creek was full from spring runoff, just like now. I fell asleep listening to it and dreamed of building something lasting." "You've accomplished that dream," Eleanor said, looking out over the prosperous ranch spread below them. "Part of it," he agreed. "But a ranch isn't just land and cattle, it's a home, a legacy." He turned to face her fully. "Eleanor, when I look at my future now, I can't imagine it without you." Her heart began to race as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside nestled a ring with a single perfect diamond flanked by small sapphires. "The diamond is for your clarity and strength," he explained. "The sapphires reminded me of the Wyoming sky the day we met." "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Eleanor Lockhart, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of building a life and a legacy with me?" Tears blurred her vision. "Are you certain? You know what people say, I know what's in my heart," he interrupted gently. "You are everything I never knew I needed, strong when I'm weak, gentle when I'm harsh, thoughtful when I'm impulsive. You balance me in ways I can't fully explain." Eleanor thought of the journey that had brought her to this moment, the pain and scandal in Boston, the uncertainty of coming west, the struggle to prove herself in Cheyenne. All of it had led her here, to this man and this choice. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Wyatt's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, their first real kiss, sweet and tender and full of promise. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Cheyenne. Most reactions were positive congratulations, well wishes, and knowing smiles from those who had watched their courtship unfold. But there were undercurrents of disapproval as well, particularly from those who considered Eleanor an outsider. "You could have had any woman in the territory," Thomas Hargrove, one of Wyatt's neighboring ranchers, commented at a gathering. "Why settle for a city girl who doesn't know one end of a cow from the other?" Wyatt's response was immediate and firm. "I'm not settling for anything, Tom. Eleanor is everything I want and more than I deserve. The sooner folks understand that, the better we'll all get along." The wedding was set for September, giving them time to prepare. Eleanor continued working at the newspaper, saving her wages to contribute to their marriage. Though Wyatt insisted it wasn't necessary, it was important to her to enter their union as a partner, not a dependent. Mrs. Sullivan proved unexpectedly helpful with wedding preparations. "I always knew you'd surprise everyone," she told Eleanor as they discussed the ceremony. "From the moment you arrived, there was something different about you, a steel underneath the refinement." "You didn't seem so confident in me then," Eleanor recalled with a smile. "It's my job to be skeptical of newcomers," Mrs. Sullivan replied. "Especially pretty young women with secrets in their eyes, but you've proven yourself a dozen times over." The weeks before the wedding weren't all smooth. Eleanor received a letter from her father, her first communication from him since he'd disowned her. It was brief and cold, expressing his disappointment in her continued poor judgment in marrying some Western cattle herder. The letter left her shaken. When she showed it to Wyatt, his jaw tightened. "Your father is a fool," he said bluntly. "To throw away a daughter like you over pride and appearance. I always hoped someday he might." Eleanor couldn't finish the thought. Wyatt gathered her into his arms. "His loss is my gain," he said softly, "but I'm sorry for your pain, Eleanor." Another complication arose when the banker's daughter, Virginia Harlow, spread rumors that Eleanor had been dismissed from her Boston position for immoral behavior rather than false accusations. The gossip reached Eleanor's ears through Mrs. Sullivan. "People are saying I was the one who behaved inappropriately," Eleanor asked, horrified. "That I was the one who—" "Virginia Harlow has had her sights on Wyatt for years," Mrs. Sullivan explained. "She's not taking your engagement well." Eleanor was torn between rage and heartbreak. The very thing she had fled Boston to escape was following her to Wyoming. Wyatt's reaction, however, was swift and decisive. He confronted Virginia publicly at a town gathering. "Miss Harlow," he said, his voice carrying across the crowd that quickly fell silent, "I understand you've been spreading false stories about my fiancé." Virginia's face flushed. "I only repeated what I heard." "Then let me make something clear, not just to you but to everyone," Wyatt continued. "Eleanor Lockhart is the most honorable woman I've ever known. Anyone who suggests otherwise is either misinformed or malicious. Neither is acceptable to me." He turned to address the gathered townspeople. "Eleanor came west for a fresh start, as many of us did. She has earned her place in this community through hard work and character. She will be my wife in September, and anyone who cannot show her the respect she deserves is no friend of mine or the Triple Creek Ranch." The direct confrontation ended the worst of the gossip. Virginia Harlow left town soon after, ostensibly to visit relatives in Denver. As the wedding approached, Eleanor divided her time between the newspaper, wedding preparations, and learning more about ranch operations. Wyatt had built a small library onto the main house as a wedding gift, filling it with books and a desk where she could write. "Your writing is important," he told her when he showed her the room. "I don't want you to give up any part of yourself when you become my wife." The gesture touched her deeply. "You truly see me, don't you?" she asked wonderingly. "I've seen you from the first day," he replied. "It just took me a while to believe you might see me too." Their wedding day dawned clear and golden, the aspens beginning their autumn transformation on the surrounding hillsides. They married in the small stone church in Cheyenne, with what seemed like the entire town in attendance. Jenkins gave Eleanor away, Mrs. Sullivan sniffled disapprovingly into a handkerchief, and Mrs. Chen prepared a feast that blended Eastern and Western traditions. Eleanor wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Chen had helped her design, with delicate embroidery along the bodice and sleeves. Wyatt couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle. "You are so beautiful," he whispered when she reached him. Their vows were simple and heartfelt. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Wyatt kissed her with a tenderness that brought fresh tears to her eyes. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing under lanterns strung across the town square. As evening deepened, Wyatt led Eleanor to his waiting carriage. "Ready to go home, Mrs. O'Brien?" he asked, his voice intimate in the darkness. The name still felt new and wonderful. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." Their first months of marriage were a blissful adjustment. Eleanor learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings, the seasonal work cycles, the relationship with the land and animals that was so different from city living. Wyatt was a patient teacher, proud of how quickly she adapted. Winter arrived again, but this time Eleanor faced it from the warmth and security of the ranch house. She continued writing, submitting stories to publications in Denver and even back east. To her delight, several were accepted, including a series of sketches about women's lives in the West. Spring brought new calves, fresh growth, and unexpected news. Eleanor had been feeling unwell for several weeks when Mrs. Chen, watching her push away her breakfast for the third morning in a row, stated matter-of-factly, "You are carrying child." The realization had been hovering at the edges of Eleanor's consciousness, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "I think you're right. She told Wyatt that evening as they sat by the fire, his expression transformed from concern to wonder as he processed her words. "A baby," he repeated, kneeling before her chair. "We're going to have a baby," Eleanor nodded, suddenly nervous. "Are you pleased?" In answer, he gathered her carefully into his arms. "Eleanor," he breathed against her hair, "you've made me the happiest man in Wyoming territory, first by becoming my wife and now by carrying our child." His joy reassured her, but as her pregnancy progressed, old insecurities surfaced. What if she wasn't strong enough for childbirth on the frontier? What if she wasn't a good mother? What if the baby inherited her father's coldness rather than Wyatt's warmth? She confessed these fears to Wyatt one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting protectively over her growing belly. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Childbirth is dangerous even in cities with doctors and hospitals. Out here, Dr. Wilson is an excellent physician," Wyatt reminded her, "and Mrs. Chen has delivered dozens of babies. You won't be alone, Eleanor. It's not just the birth," she continued. "What if I'm not a good mother? My own mother died when I was young and my father was distant at best. I don't know how to be part of a loving family." Wyatt propped himself up on one elbow to look at her. "You've created a loving home with me," he pointed out. "You've shown kindness and patience to everyone from Mrs. Chen to the newest ranch hand. Why do you doubt you'll show the same to our child?" Put that way, her fears seemed less overwhelming. "You have more faith in me than I have in myself sometimes." "That's what partners do," he said, kissing her forehead. "Believe in each other even when we struggle to believe in ourselves." The baby, a boy they named William Thomas O'Brien, arrived on a stormy November night after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. Eleanor had never known such pain, nor such transcendent joy as when the tiny, red-faced infant was placed in her arms. "He's perfect," Wyatt said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked at his son. "Just like his mother." "I think he has your eyes," Eleanor said, tracing the baby's delicate features with a fingertip. "Poor child," Wyatt joked, though his own eyes shone with unshed tears. "Eleanor, I never knew I could feel this way." "Neither did I," she admitted, marveling at the fierce love that had engulfed her the moment she saw their son. The first year of William's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights, first smiles, and tiny milestones that seemed monumental to his besotted parents. Eleanor continued writing when she could, often with the baby asleep in a basket beside her desk. Her series on Western women's lives expanded into a book, which was accepted by a publisher in Chicago. When the first printed copy arrived at the ranch, Wyatt insisted on celebrating. "To my brilliant wife," he toasted, raising a glass of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. "Author, mother, and the love of my life," Eleanor blushed at his praise. "I couldn't have done it without your support." "That's where you're wrong," he said seriously. "You would have succeeded with or without me, Eleanor. I'm just grateful I get to witness it." As William grew from infant to toddler, the Triple Creek Ranch prospered. Wyatt expanded their holdings, buying adjacent land when it became available. Eleanor's book received favorable reviews, leading to more writing opportunities. Their family expanded again when Eleanor gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Grace, when William was 3. The double blessing was accompanied by double exhaustion, but Eleanor found depths of strength she hadn't known she possessed. "How do you do it, Mrs. Sullivan asked during a visit, watching Eleanor calmly manage a rambunctious preschooler and 2 infants while discussing plans for a new school building with committee members. 3 children, a ranch to help run. Your writing career, you make it look effortless." Eleanor laughed. "It's anything but effortless, but having a purpose makes the hard work worthwhile." "You've proven everyone wrong," Mrs. Sullivan said. "Those who said you were too delicate, too refined for this life." "Not everyone," Eleanor corrected. "Wyatt always believed in me." Later, she recounted the conversation to her husband as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their children finally asleep. "Do you remember those men during the blizzard our first winter?" she asked. "The ones who said I'd never be enough for a man like you or a place like Wyoming." Wyatt took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band he'd placed there 5 years earlier. "I remember wanting to knock their teeth in for underestimating you. I believed them at first," she admitted. "I thought they might be right that I wasn't strong enough or practical enough. And now, Eleanor looked out over the ranch they had built together, the thriving business, the comfortable home, the children sleeping soundly inside. Now I know that enough isn't about where you're from or how calloused your hands are. It's about having the courage to face each day, to love fully, to keep trying even when it's difficult. You've always been more than enough, Eleanor, Wyatt said softly. You're everything. As dusk deepened into night, they sat together in comfortable silence, the legacy of their love surrounding them in the land they tended, the children they raised, and the life they had built together against all odds and doubters. In Cheyenne, Wyoming territory, an eastern woman and a western rancher had found in each other not just love, but recognition of their truest selves. Their story, like the West itself, was one of determination, reinvention, and the courage to believe that with the right person by your side, you could become more than anyone, even yourself, had imagined possible.